Thanks. I'll just reintroduce myself, Adrian Feldstein. I'm co-chair of the committee. Roberta's also here, co-chair. And so just to remind everyone of the purpose of today, it's really to continue the process that we started the last meeting. We just didn't have enough time. We had kindly heard from Mr. and Mrs. Burton and folks that they brought along, and just started to sort of hear from the commissioners on their feelings and thoughts. And so we wanted to finish that process and then see where we're at. And so I just want to make sure, because I can't see everyone in the room. So I've got Roberta, in terms of commissioners present, Roberta, myself, JR. And JR, do you like to go by JR or?
Yeah, going by JR is good.
Okay, terrific. Melinda McMillan, Justin, Bruce, Leah, and Megan. Anyone that I'm missing in the room that I'm not seeing of commissioners? Okay, excellent. So I think what we should do is I have a list written down of the commissioners, and I underlined everyone who's here, and I'm just going to go in order, but have, Roberta and I go last. I think that's kind of fair. And so now, JR, you had some comments the last time, correct? The last meeting? Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to say at this point? I know commissioners did hear from you.
Yes, I think I wanted to raise a few questions around one, I think the conversation we're having is, just to frame it for me, is delisting the heritage tree or not. So our actions aren't removing the tree. Our actions aren't doing either. It is, does this tree belong on the list? Yes or no? So I probably want to hear conversations of like why it's on the tree, why, more about like why is a tree on the list? Like, is it just because of the age of the tree? Is it because there's very few of these trees left, or do we have an abundance of these trees in Portland? Just kind of hear that a little bit more, and if there's a case to be made for removing it off the list, for the reason, like, oh, we have plenty of these trees, it doesn't need to be, or there's other trees in the neighborhood that also carry the heritage and history. That's kind of what I would want to frame too. Thanks.
Excellent questions. I'll just start by saying, just clarifying the process. Yes, so after we go around, basically, this is just about whether there's support for delisting the tree. So there'll be an opportunity to make a motion if anyone would want to, then it would have to be seconded, and it would have to have 6 commissioners supporting for delisting. So currently this is a listed tree. We could review again why this is a listed tree. We don't have the inspector here. I don't know if Jen, you want to just remind people a few words on that, or I could make a mess of it if you want.
Sure, I can speak to that. All heritage trees have to be unique according to code, based on their size, historical significance, species, unique species, for example, and other similar characteristics in order to be considered for nomination as a heritage tree. They also need to be visible to the public from somewhere reasonable. So they can't be hidden on a private property where no one from the public will ever see it. And in terms of this tree, it is a very large tree. I believe it is the only English elm, or do we have another?
It is 5.5 feet in diameter, and it's one of 2 English elms in our program.
Okay. And heritage trees, there are 300 and
Currently, there are, I think, close to 330 active
Heritage trees, located around the city. Yeah, so 2 out of 330 active trees. Is that helpful, JR? It was listed also in the 1990s, some time ago. 94. I should let Nick answer. He has all the answers.
I can also add some to this. According to the park's inventory so far, there's only 2 other English elms, this species, in any of the parks that we've inventoried. The street tree inventory does not have it differentiated by species, but there's over 3,000 elm trees, broadly speaking. Many of those are probably the American elm. And it's also should be noted that elm identification is very challenging for professional arborists. So having only 2, there could be more that were just simply misidentified, but I have the numbers in front of me here.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, very helpful. I want to ask Megan has a clarification question, she said, so why don't we just do that quickly?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. We don't have all 11 commissioners here, but it's saying that 6 votes are needed. And I'm just understanding what that means, like when we have less people, and whether or not that is inherently impacted by the fact that we don't actually have 11. Like if you're trying to get, like from either side of the coin, 6 is a bigger lift with 9 people than it is with 11 people. And I'm just understanding if there's any clarification around that from a delisting versus not delisting perspective.
Yeah, I think I can weigh in a little bit. So the 6 votes is set by code, by Title 11. That 6 votes are needed to recommend delisting to City Council, and that's just a important note of clarification in case that was missed at all at the last meeting. That the UFC's action here is to recommend delisting to City Council. If you do recommend that, it'll go to City Council, and City Council will then hold a public hearing where they will make the formal action or not. But yeah, there was desire to meet this week, and this was the most number of this was the time that accommodated the most number of commissioners. So code does require 6, and of course we don't know how the 2 absent commissioners may or may not have voted in this case.
And I'll reiterate in case it was missed, Megan or others, you do have quorum. Which means there is a full functional amount of commissioners present. There aren't so few that business could not be conducted.
I'm gonna move on. Melinda is next on my list, so why don't we go to you?
And are you looking at which way I would vote or some concerns?
No, we're probably not voting at this point. But yeah, so we just want to hear your thoughts on the matter.
So I initially, at the end of the last meeting, I was concerned about the legality of this being a heritage tree, and that the owner was not told when they bought the property, and that it had, for all intents and purposes, been an upfront process. It was just not tied to their title when they bought it. And please correct me if any of my statements were off. Now there is the heritage trees are now tied to the title since 2015, as far as I understand. But previously, when this property was not bought, it was up to the owner to do that research. And I believe that that's a concession, that the system was unfair, or, that it didn't support property owners, whether it's first-time property owners, whether it's minority property owners. We somehow acknowledged that that system wasn't working, and we've since corrected it, which I think is a good basis of an argument for, hey, this wasn't done well, let's support the property owner. So that's my concern. If any of those facts were incorrect, please let me know.
You said everything you want to say, Melinda? Okay. Let's see, next on my list is Justin.
Hey everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So first I want to thank the community members who are present as attendees, and I'd like to thank the Burdens for showing up in person. Your presence is really appreciated. So I have a couple thoughts and questions around this. First, based on last week's meeting, I heard that there was concerns from some commissioners regarding the implications of our decision and how it will affect the future of the Heritage Tree Program. But I also think it's important that we also think of other implications of our decision. For example, the community has unanimously came out to support the removal of the Heritage Tree designation. And I think it's important we think about what's the implication and the precedents that we set if we completely ignore the community on this. And then this has led me to two other questions I have regarding this issue. And the first question I have is, does the community have the right to decide what their relationship to trees look like? And then the second question is, if the commission and the city has the right to dictate and control that relationship. Personally, I think that's questions that are at the heart of this issue, and I would appreciate hearing other commissioners' thoughts on this, because the community has come to us and unanimously said that this designation needs to go. And the question is, are we beholden to the community? And should we be listening? I personally feel like we should be listening to the community, because when I look at this, I see that, we don't know what's best for communities that we don't belong to. Communities themselves know what's in their best interest. And that's why it's so important for us to listen to communities and then support the communities. So I was just curious if any commissioners have any thoughts on the questions I posed.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, you first.
Yeah, so in regards to the city deciding or not how the community, how the property owners interact with their assets on their property, it has something to say with the fact that the previous property owner knowingly asked that this tree be, if not asked, at least knowingly gave consent for this tree to be a heritage tree. And in doing so, that is them saying, we want the city to regulate this tree as a heritage tree. So it's almost specifically signing the designation to have the city then regulate this tree. So separating the city as a regulating body in this case versus the community, it seems like that almost can't be done, because at the time the community member specifically said, I want this to be in the program. It wasn't a coerced sort of situation. So I just wanted to say that as a comment.
And I'm sorry, we're kind of Zoom hindered here. So can you say your name?
Yeah, sorry, this is Casey Clapp, Commissioner Casey Clapp.
Oh, Casey, thank you so much. Good thing you said, because I didn't even have you underlined. You came in later. Excellent. Okay. Great. Why don't we do this? Why doesn't everyone get to sort of say what's on the top of their mind? And then we could have a quick go around, if you want to quickly respond to some others' comments. Does that sound fair?
Yeah. I have a couple other things that I wanted to say. I can also wait.
Yeah. Casey, you may as well continue at this point. You were actually first on the list, but you came in later. So.
Pardon, that was actually Justin who said that, I think. Yeah, I'd prefer to go whenever you had me on the list after you crossed my name out.
No, I didn't mean cross out. I meant underline that you were present. So that was just in my own notes. So you would have been first. So if you want to continue your comments, we're good with that. Why don't you just continue? What other thoughts do you have? And then that will be your turn.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you very much, Adrian. So my thoughts on this are pretty complicated, and I spent a lot of time pouring over all the information that's provided by the Burtons, by the community members, Mr. Moaning, as well as Mr. Holt. I reviewed all the information that was provided by the city, by the arborist. I visited the tree when I had a chance after the meeting was postponed. So I visited the tree yesterday in terms of just looking at it from private property. From the public property. I did not enter the private property. And I've spent quite a few hours really pouring over the history of racism and systemic racism in the Portland area specifically. And have really dived into this to try to get a good understanding of the nuances that are taking place here. So ultimately, I also have worked for the city and have not worked with this tree directly, but worked with several trees that were just down the road from this. Just one block north, there's a development that I initially started to work at, and they had two large linden trees. And those linden trees are now cut down. One I gave the approval for, but the other I stood very firmly that it could not be removed. Once I no longer worked for the city, that tree was then removed due to pressures of development. And I consistently said that the only reason I'm trying to keep these trees is code requires that I do this. That was my job. But these trees are also notably important because they were 2 of 3 trees along this entire section of road that were large form old trees that are doing the job of trees in the urban forest. The city has prioritized this, and the property owner that bought or had this property in 1994, when it was nominated, the tree, they knowingly went in and said, we give consent, we want to make this happen, we want this tree to be protected. The legacy of racism in the city goes back a long way. The state, as Mr. Moaning noted, is extraordinary. There's a lot of information out there, and I encourage everyone to read that. The thing is, the big thing that was happening, several big things: predatory zoning and lack of investment by the city, redlining. There was ignoring. There's just good old-fashioned racism that caused certain neighborhoods and certain people to have to move or get kicked out of a certain area. So the idea of systemic racism causing issues causing issues in terms of wealth building for African-American families in the Portland area is extremely real. However, that comes at an impasse here because we're also a city that is trying to develop canopy in these same neighborhoods where historically they were disinvested in. No one gave money, no one gave effort, no one at the city said, this is a community that we need to invest in and embrace. So because of that, the same neighborhood that we're talking about has one of the lower canopies in the city of Portland. This has been noted in 2018 with a planting plan by the city of Portland. And so at one side, the city is trying to retain big, large trees. In 1994, the property owner said, this is a big, large tree. I want this to be protected as a heritage tree, as the only large tree that has survived now through all the different changes in development that this city in this particular neighborhood has gone through. And Mr. Moaning was very good to point out at the last meeting that this tree has not only stood there and been, watching over, so to speak, this entire neighborhood, but don't forget what that tree was seeing, which was the effects of systemic racism and devaluing of property and all the other issues that I've discussed, but am not really qualified to really go into far more. There are things that you can read, and I encourage everyone does that. So what this comes at is also the idea of development and wealth building for the Burtons, trying to figure out what exactly is the right move here and what sort of thing to prioritize. The previous property owner entered into the heritage tree agreement very knowingly. They gave the consent and they had the expectation that this tree would be protected in perpetuity. The fact that it was not listed on the title, as Melinda noted, is lamentable. That is something that the city has fixed. The issue is you can't go back and retroactively apply the current city code to this other situation because it's an act that had to have physically been done at the time. So it makes it a very challenging thing to look back in. Also, as noted, as Justin brought up, that there is an issue of what the implications would be if a tree is delisted because the property owner says, well, I didn't know when I bought the property that it was a heritage tree. If that is the case, then any heritage tree prior to 2014 or 2015, when the code was put in, there would be a precedent set that it could be removed for essentially a lack of knowing the regulations that were also accompanying that tree, that also accompany that property. And that's a dangerous precedent to set for a lot of different reasons. And one thing that I think is important to note is that if this wasn't a tree, if this was a completely different situation where a property owner had a stream that was regulated because there was salmon that were in it, or there's a cesspool underneath the house that needed to be decommissioned before the property is developed. There are a lot of different things that are not shown on the title that then if one went to the city and said, well, I didn't know that this was an important, or rather a regulated aspect of this property. That would not be grounds for the city or whatever regulatory body to say, well, okay, we're going to waive the requirements in this case. So if this was not a tree, I don't think that there would be as much of a situation in terms of what the regulations are. There wouldn't be saying, oh, I didn't know this stream had salmon in it, therefore I didn't know that it would be regulated as such. I didn't know I was in an E zone. So the kind of the snowball effect of this could be very dangerous. And so in this case, I do want to note that the tree, it is lamentable. It wasn't there, but there was no lack of integrity on the city's part to get the tree onto the list. In terms of a policy being unknowingly damaging to a certain group of people, especially Black people in the city of Portland, like redlining and the zoning and predatory lending, things like this. The issue with that is that those were very much designed to be subtle. They were designed to be programs that negatively affected these people at the benefit of other people. The Heritage Tree Program as a program is not something that is forced on a property owner. In this case, the property owner, when you guys bought it, weren't aware of that designation. But the program itself did not coerce the property owner before that to make this happen. So it becomes an issue of blaming the city for not telling the property owner about this designation. The city of Portland does not go to or interfere with the change of properties and say, just make sure if you're buying or selling this property, you should know the regulations, and here they are. That isn't the case. The city assumes that there's going to be a conversation between the two parties with full disclosure of whatever is going on the property. So it becomes a dangerous situation to delist this tree, in my opinion, in order to remedy something that happened voluntarily before, but then because it wasn't a code requirement at the time, it wasn't listed on the title. The second thing that I wanted to bring up, the second big point, relates to the economics on a strictly economic point, where if you are trying to develop the property, and this is a property that it seems you guys are interested in developing particularly. It's in a very desirable neighborhood. Next door is a very large building that was developed in the early 2000s. And the property itself has a large tree on it, although the development potential for the building has not been fully looked into. And I say this because I work for the city as a development tree inspector. So I have a lot of experience with knowing what the city requires in order to do a certain kind of development. Notably, an early assistance meeting, I think, is one thing that would be important for the Burtons to look into, and for any of the other developed interests that are trying to figure out what can be done on this property while retaining this tree. So because the property is located where it is, they can build, anyone who owns a property could conceivably build a very large building, very similar to the one that's to the north. With the tree there are certain limitations. Okay, I won't say exactly to the north, but I know it is zoned commercial. So my understanding was that it could. Was it?
CM2.
CM2. So in terms of what can be done on that property, and what cannot be done on that property, I believe that you need to go through an early assistance meeting to have all of the understanding of the city say, here's all the different things that would need to be done on this property and what can and cannot be done on this property. That way there could be a little bit more information as to what the limitations to development are on this property. The second thing is that the property can be used as it is without removing the tree. Nobody has shown that this tree is a high risk tree. There's been many comments that say that the tree potentially could fall over, the tree potentially could drop something, but nobody has done an arboriculture risk assessment on this tree. Many of the people who did look at it are qualified tree risk assessors. They have taken a look at it and said this tree does not pose a high risk. There's also different options that are available in terms of pruning that permits have been given by the city. I'm not sure what pruning permits have been looked into for pruning on the roots inside the lot on the heritage tree, which also requires a permit. And no structural engineers have taken a look at the damage that's inside the house. And my experience as an arborist working for the city, also as a private arborist, is that damage that is seen next to a tree is often attributed to that tree. Much of the heaving that's happened is very obviously an issue of the roots. The foundation, though, is not always the case. And this is something that I've run into multiple times as a professional arborist, finding that there are two different things that appear to be related but are not necessarily related, or a situation that can be remedied easily by, say, pruning the roots and then patching up the issue that it is happening with the foundation. So the options that are available and some of the options that have not been looked into in terms of the building on that site or potentially selling the site as an investment, it's gone up 440% over the last 20 years. So as an investment property, it's been a rental this entire time. It continues to be a rental, except now obviously you can't do it, rent it out. So you're trying to remedy that with removal of the tree as well as different treatments for the insects in the tree and insects inside the house. So the main purpose of this is that there are options to remedy the situation on the property, getting rid of the beetles in the house, getting rid of the beetles in the tree, as well as different pruning options available to reduce any likelihood that a part from the tree will fail. This is a big tree. The bigger the tree, the more stable it generally is, unless some decay has come into it. So in this case, all the arborists that have looked at it have come to the same conclusion that it's a low risk tree with pruning options available. So those should be looked at. And the economics of this, while looking at all the information that are provided, the idea of doing the pruning, the maintenance, working with an arborist to see what issues can be remedied by pruning the roots and other such things would be cheaper than removing the tree entirely, because the tree itself is in a precarious situation. One of the higher bids for pruning of the tree was between $14,000 and $16,000. To remove the tree would be at least that, and very likely much more. So to do that as a heritage tree, many of these different items, if it was a private tree or a public street tree, would not be a cause for removal. So the fact that there are options available and the fact that there are other things that are happening around this tree that should be looked into in terms of development, I am not sure that this is the right move to delist this tree at this point. So that is kind of where I've come from.
I'm just gonna have to interrupt, Casey. How about one more minute, just because we have to go around the room with all the other.
Yes, I understand. I'm done. That'll be it.
Okay. Thank you for.
Question, if I can, please, ma'am.
Why don't we let all the commissioners go around the room and then everyone.
Well, I'm not going to interject anything. I just would like to know, will you save time at the end for us as the owners to address some of the things that people are saying? Because there's a lot of misinformation that I believe, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your first name.
Oh, it's Casey.
That Casey has stated. There's a lot of information he doesn't have that he stated that's not correct. That's all. Thank you.
I hope to have time for that. We're going to try to do that. But at this point, you know, we do have to hear from the commissioners and we have a process we need to go through. So we'll do our best. Okay, let's see. Next on the list is Bruce Nelson.
I'm an entomologist by training. That means insects. And I worked for a tree care company in Portland for 12 years. Did a lot of application of pesticides. I sprayed elms for elm leaf beetles in situations where we could. The information that I've heard so far, I have not heard that there were problems with elm leaf beetle in the tree previously. There may have been, but I haven't heard any information like that. I haven't heard that there had been any treatments to the tree itself. I understand there have been treatments inside the house, but the beetle does not feed inside the house. It's just resting. It's very hard because of the limitations on the types of materials you can use inside a building to kill a non-feeding insect inside a building. Perimeter treatments would be totally ineffective. The beetle, once they're in the building, they're going to stay there until the spring. Again, when I was working in the industry, we didn't have available systemic insecticides for foliar feeding insects. So that was new information to me. Some of the pest control companies were suggesting a particular material. When you said that that material is not on the list of city-approved pesticides, I can believe that. I believe they're not always the most up-to-date, and I think it would behoove them to check to see if the material that the pest control companies were recommending for treating the tree, if that falls within their parameters, however they decide which chemicals can be used within the city of Portland. A systemic treatment is basically pose much less risk to the environment than foliar spray. I mean, spraying that tree, you're going to get people coming out everywhere saying, what the heck is this? So I just didn't know systemics were available. I also don't know if there are 1 or 2 generations of that beetle a year. When I was in the industry, it was just 1 generation a year. Why does that make a difference? I was surprised when you said the beetles were present in July in the building, but maybe because of the changes in climate they're going through, they start their first generation sooner than they used to. I don't know. I do think, in my own mind, I don't see extenuating circumstances that would allow for an exception here that wouldn't open up that same exception to all the other heritage trees on private property. That's really a concern I have. I don't have, I believe, that I think certainly it's possible that the city, because of lack of funds or whatever reason, did not inform property owners prior to 2015, when properties changed hands, that this is a heritage tree. I haven't heard information as to whether there was a heritage tree sign on the tree that's visible to the public at the time you purchased the tree. I think part of the program is there are supposed to be signs on there. I don't know if this tree was inspected in 2001 by Urban Forestry or the volunteer team to verify that indeed the tree is healthy and that indeed a sign was there. I just don't know. And no information has been presented by any parties that a sign was in place. Let's see.
Hey Bruce, we're trying to keep everyone's comment to 5 minutes. So you have about
What?
30. We're trying to keep everyone's comments to 5
Okay,
minutes. You have
all
about
right,
30
I'm
seconds
coming
left.
near the end. It's not a financial guru, and I know there are lots of other expenses that we all have. I do agree that the Heritage Tree Program is inherently unfair to people who do not have a lot of income, regardless of their race, ethnicity, anything like that. I agree. I also, and the city, I was pleased to hear when City Forester Cairo said that try to get some assistance for this or that program. That was new information to me. I would like to see the city have a more aggressive program in terms of assisting heritage tree property owners with certain limitations. That doesn't exist now, so that doesn't help you. So I think where you will get highest likelihood of satisfaction is through the city council. I don't think there's grounds for this commission to find in favor.
Thank you, Bruce. Leah?
Thanks again to the Burtons for coming for the third time. I appreciate this is taking a lot of your time. I have a couple concerns. I think some of them have been said. The recognizing the shortcomings of our current heritage tree program, that the code does not have protections in place for folks who are going to struggle with the cost of maintenance, which is very, very high for these old trees. Although we can't address that in this meeting, I think it's something we can be addressing as a commission, and especially looking at code soon. So I think we'll be keeping that conversation going. In this specific circumstance, personally, I feel like, special care has been taken in Oregon and in Portland to keep Black people out of home ownership. And therefore, I also believe special care needs to be taken in a situation like this to not repeat those injustices. I understand that, like, the letter of the law says maybe this tree doesn't need to be delisted, but I also don't feel personally good about upholding that if I really don't think it's just in this case. So I'm just putting that out there. And just kind of revisiting this whole program of the Heritage Tree Program. Who is it benefiting? Who is it for? I know we were talking about unintended consequences. I believe if we really stick to the letter here in this situation, we also run the risk of really damaging trust that we're working on building in the communities we say we're trying to support. So I think we really need to think about that too. We can't do anything for communities, that's really paternalistic, without listening to what the community is saying that they need and want. So I don't think that's the path that we should be taking to try to address our tree canopy inequities. So that's mainly what I wanted to say. I also think we should be thinking about, the saying that the heritage tree has so much value to the neighborhood. Well, if the city says that, I think we need to look at how can the city help with those costs, recognizing that this tree is doing a lot to benefit, not just the people living in the Burton's residence, but the whole neighborhood. So that's all I'll say for now.
Thank you, Leah. Megan?
Hi, I'll try to be succinct. I think I'll start by saying that I recognize that this is a magnificent tree. I've seen this tree. I love trees. I work with trees professionally. And at the same time, I think that if we're leading with equity, right? I really think we have to ask what this vote means. The city of Portland uses a Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland framework, and in it says, who will we center? And in the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland framework, it explicitly, I have it pulled up, says we will prioritize the voices and needs of underserved communities, specifically Black people. That is the first thing it says, and then goes on to list who else it will center. And I have to admit, I love trees to the moon and back. I want trees in this neighborhood, but I'm going to be really direct in this heritage tree, within the framing of what it says. It specifically says now moving forward in Title 11 that it'll be listed in the deed so that people will. I get there's a whole history here. I want to be mindful of heritage trees, but I will be very explicit that I'm not going to vote to not delist this tree if it or to keep this listing if it means that a Black homeowner is going to lose their home. I can't do that. That does not feel okay to me. If I have to pick in this situation between a Black homeowner and a tree, it's very explicit what I'm going to pick. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Megan. Roberta?
Well, thanks again to the Burtons and other community guests and to the commissioners for the thoughtful deliberation you all are providing here. I've thought about this really hard too. I want to reiterate a little bit that the Heritage Tree Program, something Casey said, is a community-led program that the city responds to. When community members, property owners, and neighbors come by and say these trees are so important that we need to protect them from development because they're important to the whole neighborhood. So I think that, as Justin pointed out, we've heard from a lot of community members, but I bet you that most of the community in the vicinity of this area doesn't know this conversation is taking place right now. And it's not been public. I mean, this is a public meeting, but there's been no real public notice like there is when there's a regulatory change or something. So there's a lot of folks that don't know that this is being considered at this point. And so that'll come up in my latter comments. People have pointed out that from a tree health perspective, it probably doesn't qualify for delisting as it has been traditional in the program. I would say that, however, I too do not want to see the Burtons lose their home or their property, their rental property. Although that the exceptions that would be opened up, as Bruce pointed out, for other heritage tree owners for development could be huge. And this is a program that matters to a lot of people across the city in many neighborhoods. So, I think as Leah pointed out that I would like to see part of our action be to, if we recommend to the staff and potentially to the city council, that the city proactively look at means to assist with financial hardship associated with keeping this tree in place. I think that there may be alternatives to keeping the tree in place and to have reasonable economic return on the property, and so that the property wouldn't be lost. But the purpose of the listing was to prevent it from being removed for development like other trees were along this block or along this area that AC pointed out. I want to say that if there were to be a vote to delist the tree solely on financial hardship or because it wasn't listed on the title a long time ago, that's a decision that would be a shift from existing city policy and would be a decision that would need to be at city council. And I think with a broader discussion than the people here, and it should be subject to public notice. And I would suggest that if there were to be a vote to delist the tree on the basis of financial hardship and or not being on the deed, that it also have a corollary that says there should be it should be contingent on an amendment to Title 11 that actually lays out criteria for delisting heritage trees that would consider financial hardship and equity. And I think that because that would open it up to the type of discussion with a broad base of community members, not only in this community, but in all the other communities where heritage trees exist. So, I would rather see this tree stay in place. It provides the benefits of shade and services in a neighborhood that is low on canopy, which is another impact of historic racism in land use and disinvestment, as was pointed out. So keeping the tree in place and addressing the financial hardship so the Burtons can keep their property would be my priority. However, were there to be a vote in favor of delisting, not on the basis of the tree, but these other pieces of the puzzle, shift the policy, that should be in the context of the Title 11 Code Amendment discussion at the City Council as well. That's it for me.
Thanks, Roberta. I'll go ahead and take a few moments for comment too. Yeah, I also want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Burton and community members for coming and bringing up these important issues. We really feel your distress. And, this will definitely help us. We hope to improve processes in the future. It's really important that people speak up. And, but I also think we need to be careful. We need to separate heritage tree designation from all these other important issues, because we have another large program with over 330 trees and other owners who also face oftentimes similar issues. So, our internal and external experts have told us the tree is healthy and it's not dying or dead, and that it doesn't qualify for removal. I sit actually on, as do a couple of others in the room, on our appeals committee for non-heritage trees. And in those cases, basically, we hear from the experts, and the only way that we can sort of a sense vote against the experts is if they didn't follow the right process. So, my feeling is that for heritage trees, we should have even an additional layer of protection for them. So, as been brought up before, the beetle issues, the other issues raised can be managed, though expensive and distressful, for sure. The special factors that made this a heritage tree still exist for this tree. This, again, it's been said before, I'll just reiterate, this is a tree in an area of town that has not had shade equity. And so it makes it particularly important to public health in the community, to others, in addition to the homeowners. So we have, this special program, and let's make sure that we don't dam the program and our grandest and life-sustaining trees. Let's work together to make the program better or more equitable. If we want to make this more equitable, and that's the key issue here, let's do what we can to do that. Explore issues of, how do we make tree selection more equitable? How do we make sure that the communication is equitable, that the financial aspects associated with equitable, and other support that owners need for heritage trees. So those are my thoughts on it. What I'd like to do, let's see, we've got only 11 minutes left. So we're going to need to vote, and I want to make sure that we keep at least 6 minutes for the vote. And then, so.
Yeah. Hey, Adrian, we actually did schedule 90 minutes for this, so we do have some more time. And I think that JR did speak. I think Justin might have had a few more comments as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Justin.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So what I was speaking about earlier, and I feel like I might have not been as clear as I intended, is that when I was speaking of unintended consequences of our vote, I was specifically talking in regards to how our commission and the city interacts, and also interacts with communities and how we are seen, specifically around equity, and if we actually are serving the communities that we are supposed to be serving. In this case, the community has come out and said this heritage tree designation is harmful. These, and a lot of the people that have spoken to us are leaders of the community. And I don't see how us ignoring the community gives our commission any credibility, or how it, in my opinion, if we ignore the community in this case, it just further damages the relationship the city has with communities, and specific communities of color. We shouldn't be making decisions for communities we don't belong to. We should be listening and supporting. And for example, just based on some of the comments I've heard so far, for me, it really brings into question how committed this commission is actually. It brings into question how committed this commission is towards equity. Because if we are really committed towards equity, we would listen and then give the support that's being asked of us. And right now, I don't feel like we are giving the support that we should be giving to communities. So that's just That's just the end of my comments. Thank you.
Any other commissioners want to circle back on anything else that was said?
Adrian,
Melinda?
Mayor, Jared, yeah. There were some references about city assistance with cost or kind of financial help. And it's if we're voting now with all of this information in front of us, it's like some people have said, oh, if we could vote to keep the tree and give them financial assistance, that's one thing, or we delist. So what are we actually voting for? You know, are we voting to delist, or can we say, let's see if we could keep this and give them financial assistance? You know, that seems like a wish list thing. If we're not able to do that, we need to know that so that we can delist if needed.
Yeah, a good point, Melinda. Yeah, I think we need to separate them simply because we don't have something specific to vote on around the finances part of it. You know, that would be something we would need to develop. Certainly we can come to some consensus around next steps on that, or pass a motion to attempt to do X or Y, but I don't, unless we have something real specific, I'm not sure what we'd be voting for on the economic assistance. Others? Okay. I wanted to invite the Burtons for, let's see, 2 more minutes. If there was anything else that you wanted to say or any clarifications or questions you had.
Yes, quickly, to Casey, we have done studies about development on the property, but this is not about development. This is about uncontrollable beetles infestation that's in our home that operates year round. We have pictures that we took yesterday of beetles alive in our home. We cannot rent the home because of the beetles. If you guys do your research, and Casey, you seem to do a lot of research, find out what would be involved if we were to have a disclaimer, tell a person, here, we have beetles in the home, but we're gonna spray, we're gonna take care of the tree, sign this on. We've been told by legal experts that the people cannot sign away their rights to say that they will not have allergic reaction to the beetles, to the spraying, to the defecation of what happens with the beetles. With that in mind, if we allow the person in, we could look at anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 for just relocation fee. Plus, we would look at not getting any type of rent from them. Again, I want everyone to understand, this is not about development. This is about the tree. The beetles have made our home uninhabitable for anyone to live in and for us to collect any type of rent. We are paying out of our retirement fund for the mortgage, for the home repair loan, for all of the other related expenses, plus our primary expenses. We could probably deal down the line with the cracking of the foundation, the root pruning, but we cannot deal with the beetles. Even Jesse, the inspector, said that it will take several years to interrupt the beetles' life cycle. Pest control have said it is next, their quote was, it is a losing battle as long as the tree remains there. This is not about development. This is about our property being uninhabitable. And I don't really understand in good faith how any of you would say, the hell with the Burtons, let them lose their home, let them sell it. It'll probably go to a developer who is rich, who will be able to take on the city, fight this and probably get the tree removed. And then we will lose our property. Over the history, when you talk about whether it's intentional, unintentional, the same thing always happens. African Americans are at the end of it and we end up losing our property. Mississippi is a good example of that. It was a historically Black neighborhood until it was gentrified. We are probably the only Black homeowners on Mississippi today. We're probably only 3 or few of the homeowners that are in the Boise Elliott neighborhood. And last thing I'd like to say, in good conscience, you guys made these policies in 1994. All of you guys are experts. They had experts at that time, correct? You have city attorneys. Why would it take you 21 years to figure out that we should start telling people that this is a heritage tree on their property? As I told you, I didn't know for 3 years. When you speak of a plaque, the plaque is 5 inches long, 3 inches high. We did not see it until 3 years when they told us to go look. We didn't even know what a heritage tree meant. And then we had to walk around the tree a couple of times and then finally look up and we found this. I don't know how you tell us that. I understand the trees are important. It's not that we've had this property now for almost 22 years. We've never come before the city and asked you to delist it, to cut the tree down. But today, since May of having to deal with the beetles, May of 2022, of having to deal with the beetles. And today, yesterday, we can show you pictures of it. Having beetles still in the home makes it uninhabitable. How do you in good conscience say, the heck with that, we don't care, lose your property, we're gonna keep this tree?
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. I would like to actually ask Jen or Brian if you have any further thoughts on, some of the economic support possibilities or any other thoughts that you might have.
I can speak to that a little bit. Routinely, our team, when we encounter property owners who are having financial challenges, we can refer them to organizations with funds in the city to help with property management and ownership responsibilities. Those are typically geared towards low-income property owners. Those are organizations like REACH. So that's the way that has been dealt with to date. And Adrian, I would also say too, just because of something that somebody said before, as Mrs. Burton, as Victoria has corrected some things, I just want it to be clear. This was from the last meeting, but we'll say it again this meeting. So injection, chemical treatment for the elms, for the beetles, elm leaf beetles, a permit has been issued. The Burtons have that permit to do that work. That work has to be done at the right time of the year, given the life cycle of the beetle. So it's not a foliar spray or anything like that. And that permit's already in their hands to do that work.
But it will not kill the adult beetles. It will only hopefully kill the new beetles. It will not kill the adult beetles. And in one of the reports, one of the arborists said that the beetles are using our house as a greenhouse. We have tried to mitigate this.
Mrs. Burton, I'm going to have to turn to the commissioners now. We're going to have to.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. So Justin, do you have a question?
I had a comment, but I can also wait.
Okay, well, I'm about to basically move on to seeing if anyone wants to make a motion for delisting.
Okay, because we have 30 more minutes left for the scheduled meeting.
Yeah, that was kind of, we did that as sort of protection. Do we want to continue having a conversation? What are folks feeling? Roberta?
So I think we probably will take that 30 minutes and that it might be time well spent if it's necessary. I think I would suggest that you call for a motion. Usually when there's a motion and if there's a second, then there's opportunity for more discussion and friendly amendments to the motion and so forth before it's voted on anyway. So I'd like to see if there's if there's enough momentum to go that far, and then we can continue the deliberations a little bit, but we have enough time to for everyone to comment on the motion, because there may be some other ideas that go along with it. Thanks.
Good thought.
Can I just make a quick, if Justin wants to maybe just share comments before we get into that, recognizing that Justin said there was comments, maybe we could just make that space and then do Roberta's proposal.
Good, Justin, you're on.
Yeah, sorry, I was thrown off guard. I'm happy to go with the motions and then I can give my comments in support or against whatever motion we present.
Okay, is there anyone desirous of making a motion?
I desire to make a motion.
I will second
Okay.
that
What's the motion?
to delist.
Yeah, to delist.
And Megan, you're seconding it?
That was Melinda.
I second to delist.
Could you clarify, both of you, your reason for the motion, just so that we understand the basis of the motion, because there may be different reasons for wanting to.
Yeah, so let's start with Justin. Justin, why are you, and just want this on the record, why are you raising the motion to delist? In brief, like a sentence.
Yes.
Here
I'm
are
in,
your reasons.
in a sentence. So I'm in support of delisting, as the community has spoken that unanimously that this heritage tree needs to be removed. The designation needs to be removed. And I'm in support of the community and their wishes.
Okay, and it looks like Megan seconded it.
Melinda.
Just to clarify, it was Melinda, not me.
And I seconded it because a property owner should not lose their property to keep a heritage tree. They shouldn't be under threat of it.
Any further discussion?
I want to circle back to Roberta's comment about recognizing the broader implications and what are the mechanisms we might have to think about protecting, because I think we're talking about, we don't want this exception to be used inappropriately in a different situation. So what are ways we can think about protecting homeowners from potentially losing their home because of the cost of maintenance of a heritage tree, while also preventing like a removal of a heritage tree when that's not actually the issue? I'm not wording this very well, but what can we explore that a little bit more possibly?
Yeah, any ideas? Jen, you might have more familiarity with potential options, or Brian.
I'm not clear on what the request is from Leah. Maybe you could reframe it.
Roberta, I'll pass it to you because I think you have thoughts around this, like what amendments to the code that we could make that could kind of make this more of a clear precedent.
Yeah, I think, again, if there's votes to potentially delist this tree, there should be equity across the program that ensures that like situations are treated in like ways, that it's not just about this tree and that we're making an exception for this tree. I don't think exceptions are helpful in this situation. I think we should be saying if there's an interest in bringing to the decision makers, we're advisory, they're decision makers, a process for determining what the criteria should be that would allow a tree to be delisted on the basis of financial hardship and potential loss of home ownership. Just as an example, the wording of that would have to be very careful to ensure that that it isn't abused really across the system, but that provides the fairness and equity that needs. The other reason for doing that, like accompanying a potential recommendation to council for not only delisting, but for this discussion of a code amendment, is that, you know, again, Justin says the community has spoken, and the people who we've heard from, and there's about 7 or 8 of them, and they're tremendously eloquent and community leaders, and we are listening, believe me. But there's a whole lot of people that haven't had a chance to think about this, the implications and the potential to make financial hardship a part of the discussion of this program. And so I think that's my reason for suggesting that there would be a corollary code amendment discussion that would have broader notice, broader community involvement. And the potential delisting of this tree would be a result of that. That could take a little bit of time, but you know, I think it's important enough to not see this as something that's an exception, but something that if there's an interest in programmatic improvement and a broader discussion outside this room, frankly, with the other community members, then it's warranted at that point. The other thing we could do is talk to council at that point about financial assistance programs that could help support the Heritage Street program in particular, where there's financial hardship. There's no particular fund for that right now, but you never, I mean, but there are funds, and there could be funds established relating to the Heritage Street program potentially if it's important enough to people. So this issue is catalyzing what appears to be the need for a broader discussion about how to handle this kind of implication of the program.
Thanks. Megan, you had your hand up, or was that?
Yeah, no, I had my hand up, and I appreciate I mean, I clearly already said how I feel, so there's no mystery there, but I do think it's important to have a larger conversation. So I just want to fully support that. I think a thing that I'm grappling with right now is we keep talking about how inequitable the Heritage Tree program is and how we're going to make it equitable moving forward. And I appreciate that. We need to make our society more equitable moving forward. But there's a situation in front of us, and I am fearful we are going to make an inequitable decision while saying there's systemic racism in place. And I'm so sorry, I can't do anything about it because, you know, our system is inequitable. We need to make it more equitable. And I guess I hear that, but we also have an opportunity, and I'm a little stuck in saying, wow, it's so inequitable. I'm like, well, then let's make an equitable decision and then do better moving forward.
Other comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Justin. Now
Thanks.
I see.
I want to thank Megan for her comments on this. And I completely agree. You know, commissioners here keep talking about the city code and like precedent and all this and that. But the fact of the matter is, like, we have an opportunity right now to do the right thing and to make an equitable decision. And it is in my deepest beliefs that we have every obligation to make an equitable decision when it's presented. And right now we're being presented with the opportunity to either create equity or continue inequity. And that's how I see this decision. And, you know, I just implore my fellow commissioners.
Oh, we can't hear it.
Justin, we lost the last couple of words of yours. You cut out. You were imploring us to do something and we lost what that was.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I was just imploring my fellow commissioners to think about equity and, you know, think about how we can make the equitable decision now. And that's what I'm imploring my commissioners to do.
Any other comments? So how would we tell the city? So just a clarification for those, you know, who have raised the motion and seconded, and those with similar opinions, the reasoning behind a delisting of this tree, and how would that relate to the other 330 trees in your view? So if, you know, what I wrote down is that we want to delist because of equity, so and community wishes. So how would we apply that to the rest of the trees?
It's very
Well, I
much
would
about retaining
sorry,
the
go ahead.
home and home ownership and financial burden on the owner right now. So we are saying that in order for this homeowner to remain an owner, we have to consider the burden of this heritage tree on their property right now. And we can acknowledge that we must further, look at a code amendment and look at programs for financial assistance moving forward toward equity. But this decision was based on, the fact that they have to pull from retirement fund to pay this mortgage, and that it's not habitable because of the tree, very specifically because of this tree. That the decision can't wait another 6 months for us to make code amendments and develop programs for financial assistance, that we have to act on this now for this family and develop programs moving forward. So if this comes up again, it doesn't have to be debated for 6 months.
And so again, for clarification though, so others who are in similar circumstances, who are having trouble,
the burden of caring for a heritage tree on the property threatens ownership, yes.
Roberta?
Yeah, I'm two things are worrying me. One is who bears the burden of proof of determining if somebody's homeownership is threatened when X number of property owners who are having, these trees are big and there's a lot of cost associated with tree maintenance sometimes, and sometimes it's not affordable for some people, but to make it contingent on homeownership, you'd have to kind of, how would someone ascertain? I mean, we're taking, there's a lot of information here, but we're taking people's words for it. And I think that the city is often put in a position of saying, how do you demonstrate something like that? So, I mean, council would have to grapple with that, but I mean, I appreciate what Melinda's saying, that what I think you're saying is any message to council, if there were a vote to delist this tree, you would say, this is a very narrow application in this particular circumstance. This is a unique circumstance that hasn't come before us to date that we're aware of, and that we realize that this is potentially a problem. We realize that this is a different kind of a situation than we typically have with heritage trees or other trees. And I just worry about that, you talk about equity. I think the program has to be applied equitably. We can't sort of, have favoritism against for one property owner versus another one. It's going to be challenging to deal with that if other owners come in with the same implications if they're in the Southwest Hills, or wherever. I worry about that a little bit. And
doesn't the fact that we have qualifications saying we want to develop, programs or code amendments to ensure that we are better prepared for this argument if other owners come up, but those programs aren't in place now. We had to make this decision. I think we can put enough qualifying language into that, saying we're acting on this for future events. We must act on this now because of the owner's situation. I'm wary about it too. I mean, I deal with developers all day long, so I understand, what they can do for their own interests, but we're not dealing with that. They have basically character witnesses and so many other community members that have stepped up to say, this is the situation. We're looking at it from many different points of view. This is what we need to do. And I can trust, the voices that they've brought to the table in order to say delisting makes sense right now. Let's work for a better system in the future, but the Burtons can't wait, several more months for us to keep talking about this.
So early on, just to circle back to JR said, we're not suggesting that, we're not approving or recommending the removal of the tree. But we are. If we vote for this, be clear that the Burtons are saying they can't have the tree and have their house be inhabitable. And what would happen is when that tree is delisted, if I'm hearing that you correctly, Ms. Burton, is that you have to take the tree out. You know, the beetles, you can't fix the beetle problem and have people unless you take the tree out. And that would have to happen soon. And given that it's less than 10 feet from a structure, they would be allowed to, you would be allowed to do that outright with a simple permit. And so I think that just so everybody's clear that with a vote to delist and what we're hearing from the property owner, what they feel that what their life requires is they would take the tree out. And I think the other thing I'm wondering about is, you know, when other people who in the neighborhood or others, if that tree were taken out, would they be saying, what happened here? You know, because they weren't really part of the discussion. So, but it will go to council. It will go to council if we recommend delisting, and it will be again discussed there. So there'll be more opportunities for people to discuss it. And I think I would recommend a friendly amendment to the motion. This is not my vote, but with your motion on the table, I would like to sort of add to it what Melinda was suggesting, which is that with the motion comes a recommendation to the city council that along with the basis to consider a delisting, because they're going to make the decision based on financial hardship and equity issues and home ownership, that we recommend strongly that they initiate a code development process to address this the criteria for listing and delisting of heritage trees. They're both pretty much loosey-goosey at this point, and we could use more guidance, and then all these issues would be on the table, and we could develop a type of program that, I don't think the program is inherently inequitable across the board, but I think it creates challenging situations like this, and there ought to be some guidance. So
I agree. I agree to that qualification to our motion, saying that we need to develop further, but I would like it to be very clear that this is a near emergency situation for the owner. You know, if the mortgage is under threat, right? Let's not just say, oh, we need to talk about code in the future. Let's reiterate this decision has to be made now.
So yeah, we're going to need to move, you know, towards voting. I'm a little unclear on what the exact amendment is that you're suggesting. And I'm wondering if we need to start with a very clean thing to vote on.
You mean Roberta's amendment? I think it's just that what we stated earlier, that we want a code amendment to address a situation like this in the future so that it's clear. Also looking at programs for financial assistance for the burden of caring for heritage trees for property owners. I don't know that it needs to be an amendment so much as a qualification to why we delisted now. These programs are not in place for home ownership, for homeowners. As we develop these things, we needed to make a decision right now for this family.
Yeah.
And then we as a commission need to follow up and decide what kind of amendment needs to happen.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw out the opportunity to separate those things, to say whether or not we're going to support delisting. And then if there's another amendment, to give certain feedback to city council, because I don't want to muddy the waters in terms of what it is we're actually voting for. In other words, some people might be for one thing or against the other. And so if we do them separately, then you know, it gives us more opportunity. Does that sound reasonable to go with the original motion? Those who
I-
raised and seconded, Linda and
So one, we're voting for delisting. And
Right.
two, we're voting to amend the code for future events.
to recommend that city council give us direction,
Yeah.
better direction.
So the amendment that I was suggesting was that we recommend to council that they direct staff to initiate a code amendment process to look at criteria for listing and delisting of these trees so that it can be done.
Yeah.
Across.
I like that. Is it okay if we separate those?
I think so. Jen's raising her hand.
Okay, Jen.
Yes, Roberta got it closest, just to be clear on commission's role when it comes to code. Only city council creates code. It is staff's job to present options for code and code amendments to council. So Melinda, just to be clear, that's something that the commission advises on, but the commission itself would not be the initiator of code.
So our policy committee couldn't write up a suggested code amendment?
The policy committee can write whatever it would like to write. However, city codes are by their very nature rather complex. They often involve multiple different parts of different bureaus. Our next code amendment project is scheduled to begin in 2024.
Is it possible to make a comment or after they want to raise a question?
You know, we really, at this point, we really do need to move on to a vote. I'm sorry about that. What I want to do, though, is summarize what I think I just heard, which is that we could certainly work with urban forestry on what it would take to do a code amendment around this or ask for more clarity. But I don't hear that we have anything really to vote on in regards to that tonight. So I want to suggest that we move forward with, we have a amendment, or we have a motion to delist the tree on the table that's been seconded. And so I'm going to call for a vote on all those in favor of delisting the tree, either raise their virtual hand or raise their hand in person. And give me a second, though. I'm going to make sure I got my list here. Okay, so I've got Melinda as a yes. And Justin as a yes. Megan as a yes. JR as a yes. Okay. Okay, Leah, I see a yellow hand. Is that a vote yes? Or, I mean, a white hand? That's a vote. Okay. Okay, and all those against delisting? Okay, I've got Roberta as a no, me as a no, Casey as a no.
And Bruce.
Okay, and Bruce as a no. Okay, any abstentions? Let's see, Roberta, you still have your hand up. That's okay. Any abstentions? Okay. So I want to just make sure I've got everyone's vote. And so at this point, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recommending delisting, and 1, 2, 3, 4 not recommending delisting. And so this will not move forward as a recommendation to City Council, the delisting, because that requires 6 votes. So do we want to, let's see, we've got 4 more minutes. do you want to just conclude around what we want to do? Either put forward to another meeting agenda or some proposals on dealing with some of the other things that we're concerned about in terms of equity, financial support, that sort of thing. Is that a new hand, Roberta?
He's a new hand.
Okay.
Could we submit some sort of correspondence to the city council or discuss at the next meeting? I'd like to see this issue and a code amendment process that the staff would be, developing with us and other stakeholders to address this issue ahead of the Title 11 update. I think it's important. I anticipate potentially that the Burtons might take this to the city council further. I'd like the commission to acknowledge that this discussion took place and the nature of it and how thoroughly we were grappling with it and we were torn, and there were implications for the program, there were implications for the property owners, and we have a code that isn't providing sufficient guidance on the criteria for listing and delisting trees, particularly as relates to anything really, but that relates to potential financial hardship and equity issues. And I think they do sometimes do emergency code related updates. They don't take as long. But I think it's worth exploring this because I don't want this to just sort of, I feel like something should happen where we say something happened here and we're not gonna just let it slide because it didn't get the votes that it took. So I would
Roberta,
yeah.
I just want to know, what would be a timeline, do you think? Because I know the Burtons don't have a lot of time to figure out what they're going to do next. So how quickly can we make something like that happen?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, but it's an important enough code amendment that it actually shouldn't just get ramrodded through the community. There should be opportunity for some discussion. And perhaps during that interim period, there could be some assistance in financial assistance for the elm treatment or looking at the need for root work or something that might help get the tree in place.
It's not about the roots, people. It's about the beetles that are in our house. You guys keep talking about the roots, the structure. It is the beetles that is preventing us from renting. And I want all of you tonight, when you go home and you're sleeping, you think about that you are pushing us out of our home because you care more about a tree than you care about a human being and life. I have had this property for 22 years. I've never come to you guys and asked you for anything. Only one time in 2019, I asked for help from the forestry department, and I was told there was no help that they had for Heritage Tree. Now I'm coming to you and telling you, I have done everything I humanly possibly can. I've done everything that experts have told us to do, and it is not working, people. The beetles are still there. We have pictures, we have documentation, and you're not hearing me. It's like you don't hear that we are going to lose our property and you want to keep a tree for our property.
I'm gonna have to.
I don't have anything else to say to you guys.
But we do, we will, what I would say is, let's take this up as an agenda item. If you guys want to have further discussion on email, we'll do that. So yeah, it's not an easy issue, really tough.
No, it's worse than tough. It's financially devastating. That's what it is. You're taking generational wealth away from us. Our grandchildren will not have it. This is our property that we bought 22 years ago to create generational wealth. And instead, you guys are more concerned about a tree. And really what it is that you guys, it's just crazy. It shouldn't, you guys are all these experts, but it took you 21 years to figure out that you should put a tree on title so an innocent homeowner such as myself, buyer, would know that they have this heritage tree. I didn't know what a heritage tree is. 21 years.
Mrs. Burton,
21 years. I'm done with you guys. 21 years.
Good
21.
night,
You did this in
commissioners. Thank you.
1994 and you did wait until 2015. You say that the property owner could have told us. What if the property owner is dead? What if the property owner is incapacitated? What if the property owner doesn't tell us? You're city employees. You couldn't use common sense to say, let's let the public know that they have a tree that is protected on the property. It would allow me then to go to an arborist to tell me, what does this mean? The tree is only 8 feet from our foundation. Any tree
Okay,
8 feet from
you're
a
in a public
foundation will
meeting now.
damage it. Why
And,
couldn't you guys do that?
I'm gonna
We
have to
wouldn't be
excuse
here
the
now. You're
commissioners
so
if they
intelligent,
leave.
yet you lack common
sorry.
sense. I'm sorry. If
Good
we
afternoon.
lose our property, it is on each of your head. This is what continues to happen to African Americans, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Your policies, you end up, we lose our property. That's why Mississippi's lost. Everybody says, oh, I'm sorry now. Oh, I'm sorry. 20 years later, yeah, we should have done better. But you know what? We suffered the consequences of it. And it's really interesting that the majority of you are white.
Thank you.